Yeah, you should. If you join, you should be able to see it too. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Hello, Facebook. My name's Patrick Coffin. Welcome to our weekly live stream. We're going to talk about things that you might not hear in the MSN, things arcane, things common, things maybe counterintuitive. I have a weekly podcast called, oddly enough, The Patrick Coffin Show, which drops every Tuesday morning. This week's guest is Gemma O'Doherty, who is kind of Ireland's non-homosexual Milo Yiannopoulos. She's been a person of interest by our good friends at Google that own and control YouTube. They've removed both of her channels, and she's doing an ongoing protest outside Google headquarters offices in Dublin. Very interesting lady. And if there were 10 Irish women like Gemma and perhaps John Waters, Ireland would be a very different country. So we also run a membership site called coffinnation.com if you want to get on the waiting list. And without further ado, which I think is the correct pronunciation, adieu, want to welcome my good friend Michael Knowles of the Michael Knowles Show, part of the Daily Wire Roundup, and he's also the author of Reasons to Vote Democrat, and I'm sure a growing passel of other creative offerings for the public viewing audience. Michael, so great to have you aboard.
Patrick, thank you for having me.
I'm wearing a tuxedo, and you may think I'm joking, but I am, as my readers and listeners and now viewers can attest, because I did not want to be out-dappered by you, sir. So,
well, it's too bad. I wish I had a monitor so that I could see. I at least would have thrown on my smoking jacket and, a bow tie or something to match you for the occasion.
Oh, man, this is like a Pyrrhic victory. I'll have to save it for an actual smoking event meetup.
That's right, yeah.
But, love your stuff, Michael. Big fan of the way you get things across. You're always so charitable to your enemies, unlike me, on places like Twitter. So
I will say, Patrick, your Twitter account is one of the reasons that I go on Twitter. It is just endlessly educational, certainly, but I don't really care about that. I just love the zingers. I mean, it is endlessly entertaining to watch.
Of the zing. Yes, some people say I suffer fools gladly, but I have this policy on Twitter. So if you're listening or watching now, it's at Patrick_Coffin. That's my Twitter handle. I do not engage what I call FNCs, fake name cowards. There's a whole cadre, mercifully few in number, who insult me to get my attention, and they want to debate. They want to debate me into the mat. But they use these pompous fake names, and I just block them, just because I'm tempted to engage in some kind of debate. But then Twitter itself becomes the world's largest time vampire, and life is short. So. Your book, your endlessly readable book, Reasons to Vote Democrat, how's it doing on the Amazon?
I think every time there's a Democratic presidential debate, it shoots up another 500 spots. This book, I had been researching it all of my life, and then I published it shortly after President Trump's election in 2016. And it, within 3 days, it shot to the #1 selling book in the world. It was there for about a week and a half. The president eventually endorsed it, and you can read it in about 45 or 50 seconds. And that's including the extensive bibliography, 250 or so blank pages. And I think it has never been truer than it is today. It's always been true, as I write in the beginning, quoting Thucydides. It is not a mere essay for the moment. It is a work for all time. And every time Joe Biden and Kamala Harris open their mouths, I think I sell another 5,000 copies.
And think of the money you spent on translators. I should say saved.
That's right.
Right. Awesome. Is it true? Have you heard this rumor that deep-pocketed, high-net-worth Republicans are donating to the Marianne Williamson campaign to keep her in?
I am not only aware of that, I have been actively encouraging this. I'm a little wary because Marianne Williamson legitimately is nearly a witch. I mean, she is a new age guru. She is peddling some deeply diabolical stuff. But, so are those other candidates on the stage. And I just want to see her talk to Joe Biden and at least liven the thing up. If I have to watch it, I want it to be entertaining. I don't know if she's going to make it to the next debate, though. I think her spiritualism and the Oprah Winfrey slogans can only take you so far.
I agree with the occultic stuff. It's easy to dismiss it as, you're just being, this is hyperbole. But Helen Schucman, really the font of the Course in Miracles, was a very disturbed woman. I know the priest who preached at her funeral, the late, great Father Benedict Rochelle, and he said she was in a catatonic profound pit of depression for the last 2 years of her life, hearing from this spirit called Abraham, that it became the Course in Miracles. Folks who are interested, I would recommend you go to newAgeDeception.com. My friend Sharon Lee Giganti was an Abraham ambassador, and she ended up telling a troubled friend, based on everything she learned from Helen Schuckman and the Marianne Williamson types, what she told a friend of hers who was troubled and contemplating suicide, that God wouldn't be offended if she did that, because you would just emerge into the brighter light. And that woman killed herself that night. So Sharon has, gone through a lot of guilt, but that brought her back to the fullness of her Catholic upbringing. So she's ringing the bell to warn people of New Ageism, and it's like a multi-headed Hydra monster. You can't really define the New Age movement with any clarity, because there's so many permutations of the error at the heart of it. Basically, is I'm God, God isn't.
Right. It is, endemic of our age that it's a religion or a quasi-religion of the self. So everything is about the self. A lot of people who say they're spiritual but not religious are basically saying they're not terribly interested in God, but they find themselves very interesting. And in so much as A Course in Miracles can be the sort of Bible of New Ageism, or at least the center of it, it is a little tricky to figure out which parts of it are just a very troubled woman hearing voices in her own head that are really just her own subconscious, and how much of it is genuinely diabolical. And I know Father Grichel was a little unclear on what it is, but when you read some of that book, it's very difficult to dismiss the idea that there is a demonic basis to it, that there is genuinely something dark and spiritual, to use Marianne Williamson's phrase, a dark psychic force that is lying at the root of that book and the New Age movement.
Do you think that goes to the uber open-mindedness of the Democrat Party, that someone like that can rise to that level where they're competing on the debate stage with other candidates for the highest office in the land?
I actually think it speaks to one of the weaknesses of the Democrats, the other Democrats on the stage, which is that they're not speaking about the spiritual basis of politics. The Andrew Breitbart, the great patron saint of Hollywood conservatives, famously said that politics is downstream of culture. Culture, as we know, is downstream of religion. The cult and the culture are related words, and what a culture worships will define that culture. And when President Trump talks about politics, he is speaking in a cultural and even religious way. He's talking about these symbols that we share, this shared sense of the sacred, American flags, the 4th of July, apple pie. And a lot of the Democratic candidates, they're just bean counting. They're talking about how many trillions of dollars they're going to spend on loan forgiveness, or this aspect of health care, or this way you're going to tweak insurance regulations. Then Marianne Williamson gets up there and she says, I'm talking about love, baby. I'm talking about dark psychic forces. And I think she's speaking plainly to people about what we all suspect, which is that there is a spiritual and moral dimension to politics. Now, she's peddling diabolical heresy, but in many ways, she's just the Democratic version of President Trump, just totally wrong on her prescriptions, but on her intuition of how to speak to people, she is similar to Trump, even in so much as she brings her own audience, and she's been a fixture on television now for 20 years.
Yeah, here's a segue from occultism and a godless universe. If you do a LexisNexis search of the biographies of, let's say, school shooters from Columbine to today, the El Paso and Dayton events, you will find invariably they're atheists, or they come from a doctrinaire agnostic background. They're often immediately tainted as either Trumpians or white nationalists, but really at the heart of it is nihilism. If you believe there's no God, there's no final judge, there's no one to whom you're accountable for your actions, and if 51% or more of your life is hopeless, on the atheist account, what would be wrong with taking other people out with you?
Of course.
Never heard a good answer for that.
Of course. I mean, when you read what these people are writing, you read their manifestos, you realize that the mainstream media account that these are somehow Christians, or they're Trump supporters, or they're regular conservatives. That's not true at all. What you really have is a nihilistic worldview in the case of that eco-fascist who shot up the mall in Texas, or in the case of that avowed leftist who shot up the bar in Ohio. What you also see that's a common thread is broken families. So it's not just that the spiritual part is broken, that's gone downstream. And the culture's broken too. The vast majority of these lone gunman mass shooters come from broken homes, grow up fatherless, and I think that was clearly the case with the El Paso shooter. He grew up from his early teenage years. His father ran away, abandoned the family, and his parents split.
Yeah, his father. I don't want to trumpet the name, but the father was a kind of a new agey psychotherapist who literally abandoned his family when the kid was it's a pre-teenager. On December 23rd, the wife left, and then he left. So literally, children left to fend for themselves on Christmas. So there's a kind of a malignant narcissism there. Because everyone wants they want to blame guns. They want to assume that guns are sentient evil beings that make decisions, or they'll blame this nameless society, or they'll blame the president or a political party. No one's angry at the perpetrator or the devil.
Right.
You know?
That is the issue. When Marianne Williamson says there's a dark psychic force that we need to fight, in a sense she's quite right. I mean, the devil does lie at the heart of the brokenness of man and our temptation and our fall. But because the left has largely embraced materialism, they just can't talk in that way. So it's got to be the guns, right? Except you look and you say, none of the gun control legislation proposed or enacted in the last 20 years would have prevented these shootings. Banning the assault weapons, so-called, and even that term is a made-up term to refer to very common guns. You pull the trigger once, one bullet comes out. They're now trying to talk about these red flag laws, and there seems to be bipartisan consensus. The red flag laws don't work. How do I know they don't work? Because Connecticut was the first state to enact red flag laws in 1999, and yet 13 years later we saw one of the most deadly and tragic mass shootings at any school in the country in the Sandy Hook massacre. The red flag laws didn't do anything to stop it. All it would do is infringe upon law-abiding Americans' constitutional rights. And we now see this even in the church. I mean, the bishops came out and said we need responsible gun laws. Well, of course we do, but we have 20,000 gun laws on the books in the United States. And as far as I can tell, guns have never been prohibited by the Catholic Church. I was reading a piece by my friend and priest in New York, Father George Rutler, who pointed out that Pope St. Pius V contracted with the Beretta Company, you know, the Beretta guns. He contracted with the Beretta Company to fight the Battle of Lepanto that saved Western civilization. And Pope Leo XII would regularly sit in his Vatican gardens and shoot doves out of the sky with his own pistol. So I don't think guns themselves are the evil. It is the wicked actions of men who choose to commit evil acts, who are perpetrating that moral evil.
Right. So when a machete or a knife attack happens in England, or I don't know, a 757 flying into a building, or a van, unloading itself into a crowd, no one calls for machete, knife, 757, or van control laws.
Of course. I mean, there's not something particular about these guns. Even they always call to ban the dread AR-15.
Yeah.
And they call it an assault weapon to confuse people with the term assault rifle, which refers to fully automatic weapons that have been banned for decades. The AR-15 is a regular old gun, one of the most popular guns in America. But when you look at the statistics, you realize that each year, over 22 times as many people are killed using handguns than are killed using any kind of rifle, including the AR-15.
Yeah.
So why do the gun control advocates always focus on the AR-15s, which are involved in virtually no shootings per year, when they could focus on the handguns? It's all about emotional manipulation, and that's why you're hearing calls to do something now. We need to do something. We can't wait. The reason they say we can't wait is because they don't want us to stop and actually use our brains and think about this. It's a process of emotional manipulation, and unfortunately it appears to be working.
The great Frank Sheed, one of the great English language Catholic apologists, wrote his last book. It's called The Church and I. And in that book, he's got a chapter on sex. I quote it in my book, The Contraception Deception. He says, in matters sexual, man is... I'm going to maybe butcher it. In no area other than the sexual is man more prone to auto-kittery. In other words, we emote about sex, we dream about it, it's a visceral thing, but what it's very difficult to do is think about it. There's something, and there's some analog here with guns. It's easy to emote about them because when something goes terribly wrong, emotions are involved because there's a loss of life. But to apply your mental muscle, just in the cold, hard data about what happens in the real world, it often contradicts the emoting of the left. And one example of that is something that almost never reaches the news, and that is when good men with guns thwart crimes. It's completely filtered out of the coverage.
Of course, because what's funny is they're talking about women's rights and how there's a patriarchy and how we need feminism, and yet we know that men are physically stronger than women. Men overpower women. That's the premise of the patriarchy. There is only one way to equalize that playing field, and the way to do it is to give a woman a gun. All of a sudden, a woman with a gun can fight back. That is an innovation in human history, and yet the left, which purports to care about women's rights, would be the first to disarm that woman and leave her physically vulnerable.
Right. That reminds me of the virtue signaling companies like Netflix who want to leave the state of Georgia. They haven't really thought this out because of the pro-life law, right, that's coming up thanks to Governor Kemp. They're leaving thousands of liberal feminists out of work in Georgia. You know,
that is true. All those TV hands are not going to get a whole lot of work once they're out of there.
I just want to recap for folks who just joined us. This is a live stream hangout with Michael Knowles of The Michael Knowles Show. Great podcast in the Daily Wire universe. He's also the author of a fine book that you must get called Reasons to Vote Democrat. It's an easy read. It's a bit of a tome, but you can get through it in under 50 seconds. Available at Amazon.com. Topic is, maybe we're going to turn now to the official title, in but not of, which is a famous traditional phrase meaning in the world but not of the world, which is what Christians are called to do. So we're taking questions, first of all, from our good friends at Facebook, and then the YouTube channel Combox as well. Sorry, what was that? On our website. Yeah, our website as well, patrickcoffin.media. Oh, sorry, coffinnation.com. Yes, I've been corrected here. Yeah, I have an invisible friend, Nipsey, who often speaks to me cyberly. So, Mike, you're a Yaley, and maybe just a little bit of bio on you. How did you come to be such a shameless Romanist? Did you join the Tiber swim team? Are you raised, rebelled, returned? What's the compressed version?
The raised, rebel, return, I think, is the way to describe it. I was a cradle Catholic, and by the time I was 13, I fell away from the church. And I was always very interested in religion. I always did very well in CCD and Catholic school. And by the time I was 13, I think there was this perfect storm of forces. First and foremost was the intellectual pride and hubris and arrogance of a precocious 13-year-old boy, which I was totally guilty of. The second was the Catholic Church sex scandal, which was happening around that time. And then the third was that publishing fad called the New Atheists, Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. And I found their books terribly convincing and charming. I think prideful and precocious 13-year-old boys is the target audience for all of those New Atheist books. And then once you grow up and think a little bit, you stop finding them terribly credible. But at the time, I was taken with them. And so I would have called myself an atheist for probably 10 years. Ernest Hemingway describes going bankrupt, and he said, it happens gradually, then suddenly. That was my return to the church. So when I was about 18, I show up to Yale, very famously a godless place. Bill Buckley wrote his first book on that, God and Man at Yale. And I noticed my classmates were pretty smart. I'm not saying they were stupid. They were quite intelligent, and they were all atheists, except for the most intelligent ones. And the most intelligent ones weren't atheists. They were Christian. And I found the most intelligent of them were Catholic or becoming Catholic or at least Eastern Orthodox. You know, they were part of a broader and deeper Christian tradition. And I thought, well, that's a little funny. I wonder about that. Then my roommate presented to me an argument for God. So an argument appealing to my own intellectual pride. And the argument was actually formulated by a Calvinist, Alvin Plantinga, but it was a reworking of St. Anselm of Canterbury's ontological argument for the existence of God, which apparently convinces nobody, because the argument essentially says it's not impossible that God exists, therefore God exists. But it convinced me. I think it actually convinced C.S. Lewis. And then I became acquainted with the more Thomistic arguments for God. And, it just went on and on like this. I met an evangelical Protestant guy in the Quad. He passed me out Mere Christianity. I read it. And then Lewis brought me to Chesterton. Chesterton brought me to Hilaire Belloc and more of these Catholics. He brought me to Owen Barfield. I mention all this to say it took a total kind of just intellectual or academic journey before I got to the point of religious experience. And that happened after I graduated from college. A few more coincidences. I found my way to Father Rutler's church in New York, the Church of St. Michael, and it all clicked. I mean, that was really the moment where the sense of what Lewis would call the numinous, the sense of religious experience really set in. And that was more or less a defining moment. And then since then, I've just swum deeper and deeper in the Tiber. And, fortunately, because I think part of the reason I fell away too, beyond the pride, was that I was presented with a childish religion in many ways by the churches that we were going to. And it was a very sappy, Dan Shute, acoustic guitars and like lame songs from the 70s.
St. Louis Jesuits. Yeah.
Say the St. Louis Jesuits. It was felt banners. It was a saccharine and childish presentation of the faith. And fortunately, while I was off being an atheist, Pope Benedict XVI, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, wrote his Motu Proprio, which permitted the extraordinary form of the Mass, the return of the Tridentine Mass, smells and bells and tradition. When I returned to the church, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I thought all of Catholicism was lame electric guitar riffs, but this is really something beautiful, beauty ever ancient, ever new. And that experience of liturgical seriousness I found so totally captivating. And the expansion of the Latin Mass is one of the great signs in the church. The baby boomers, I find, are the ones who go to the acoustic guitar masses, and there are 10 of them in the pews, and no one really pays attention. And they're the ones telling all us youths that we need to liven up the liturgy for the young people. Meanwhile, I go to the Latin Masses and the Tridentine Mass, and it's all, 25-year-olds basically, and they've all somehow got 10 children. I mean, this is the real growth in the church. And on occasion, when I go to those Masses, I see one Patrick Coffin there.
One is enough, sir. Ask my wife. Yeah, the irreplaceable nature of reverence in worship, whether or not it's the extraordinary form that I have a special love for as well. And I also discovered that late in life. Yeah. There are certain markers you can tell which are the families that are all in, and large families are definitely one of them. Catholics love to lament the low information level of so many Catholics at the suburban parish level, but I wonder how skewed that is. If you went to like an FSSP parish or a good Norbertine Latin Mass parish, or at least where it's not shunted off into, Mass begins at 1 a.m., I'll bet you those statistics will be at least reversed in terms of the real presence and the divinity of Christ and so on.
Of course, and even, I love the extraordinary form, but even just a reverent Novus Ordo Mass is such an improvement. A Mass where the priest is ad orientem and where there is some chanting and they don't have all those bubblegum pop songs, and there's just a real sense that we're not here to be entertained by a ham actor priest, but we are here together to worship God and participate in the Mass, the highest prayer. It doesn't need to be an hour and a half long Tridentine Mass for that. Just bringing back a little bit of the reverence, it goes such a long way, and I think it would go a long way, particularly among millennials and Gen Z, who don't want the bubblegum and don't want the rock and roll. What I find, and I talk to a lot of them, is that they're desirous of orthodoxy. They're desirous of a strong religious formation that has largely been denied them.
100%. I just got back from a magnificent camp for teens in Donnelly, Idaho. I want to give a plug for Apologeti Camp, sometimes pronounced Apologeti Camp. So it's the weekend outgrowth in the summertime of a monthly meeting in Boise, Idaho. And it's hardcore Catholic apologetics without apologies, ages 13 to 18 or so. And the Masses were celebrated Novus Ordo, ordinary form, but with maximal Latin and ad orientem. And a lot of these teens had never had this before, and they expressed so much appreciation. of not having to constantly either nod or affirm the priest all throughout the Mass. As I say, I like my pilots to be facing forward, when I fly.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, it really, even just that change, obviously changes the whole direction of the Mass. You realize it's not about you. You are not here to be entertained. You are not here to make the priest feel good about himself. You're not here to give a big round of applause at the end. You're actually doing something. And I think at least one of the qualities of my religious upbringing that drove me away from the church was the sense that we were all just kind of pretending. Nobody really believed in the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Nobody really believed in these stories. It was just sort of be a good person. What Reinhold Niebuhr would describe as a God without wrath, leading a people without sin into a kingdom without judgment through the ministrations of a Christ without a cross. And I thought, if this really doesn't mean anything, I've got way better things I can do with an hour on Sundays. I can go watch cartoons and eat cereal. But when you turn that, when you literally turn the priest, and when you realize that you are all facing in one direction, you are all really doing something, and you are witnessing a miracle happen, then you couldn't drive to church fast enough.
Right. It's the opposite of clericalism. People of a certain age will remember Johnny Carson, and a lot of the narcissism that's behind liturgical abuse is that some priests, unfortunately, feel that they have to act in persona JC, Johnny Carson, the other JC. Then it becomes a cult of personality, and you want to go to the 10 o'clock Mass because Father's so relevant. Meanwhile, the church is burning down, and people aren't loving Jesus Christ and making him loved because, as you say, it's all been redefined to be that moral deistic therapeutic. What's that famous phrase? Is that Christopher Lash? Therapeutic moral deism, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I regularly, I quote him too often because otherwise I'd steal his lines. But another line from my priest in New York, Father Rutler, was to describe this precise phenomenon. He said it was the phenomenon of priests who, like a ham actor in a dying vaudeville show, would tell jokes in the homily, and they should perhaps limit their repertoire to the jokes that St. John told the Blessed Virgin while her son bled on the cross.
Ouch,
really
that
drives the point home.
Father Rutler is the master. I've interviewed him many times. If you see him before I do, give him my regards. He's a true. There's a priest who would be guilty of easily charged with an EWC, existing while Catholic.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And he has the zeal of a convert because he came over from the Church of England. And I sometimes I'm really pleased, actually. Not that I was out in the wilderness for so long as an agnostic or an atheist, but coming back into the church, reverting, gave me the zeal of a revert. It allows you to see the church anew and appreciate it anew. And I do find converts and reverts do have a special zeal that is really valuable. Yeah,
you realize, too, along with that, is I could actually lose this again. All it takes is one mortal sin freely entered into with full consent, or drifting away because my ears become itchy for something else, which goes back to the importance of praying not just on Sundays but every single day. The Sunday Catholicism box ticking model is done; it's dead. And Exhibit A of that would be Ireland or Quebec or Malta. It can only last one generation on the fumes of cultural Catholicism. It does not work. It has to be discipleship on purpose.
That's right. It's an example of that Hemingway, things happening gradually, then suddenly. To wake up one day and realize that Ireland, of all countries, Catholic Ireland, was going to redefine marriage. That Catholic Ireland was going to embrace abortions. It was unthinkable because on the surface everything had looked fine, and you realize that actually the integrity of Catholicism in Ireland had just been totally rotted out from the inside.
Have you heard of Daniel Mahoney? Daniel J. Mahoney has a new book, The Idol of the Age. He was my guest 2 weeks ago. It's a great distillation of his thesis, which is that the religion of humanity has subverted Christianity, with 10,000 examples from the last 6 years or so, especially. But he quotes someone else whose name's escaped me, and that is, are we to be salt of the earth and to love our enemies, as Christ said, or are we sugar of the earth and have no enemies? That's a great way to put it. That's a divider right there.
And we have embraced, in our secular culture, we've embraced the religion of humanitarianism. I mean, we use the phrase humanitarianism as a synonym for good. He's a humanitarian. It means
Right.
he's a nice person. He's a good person.
Philanthropist.
But of course, that's right, philanthropist. But of course, that religion, while there might be some nice effects of humanitarianism, ultimately doesn't hold up. And our charity has to come from somewhere. There has to be some kind of basis for our religious thought. Otherwise, it devolves into these shallow modern systems that don't often produce more harm than good.
Yep. Shout out to people just joining us on Facebook and simulcasting on YouTube and Twitter. Michael Knowles of The Michael Knowles Show, the great podcast, part of the Daily Wire world. What's the best way to connect from people listening to you right now, Michael, to you? Do you have is there a website that you send people to?
Yes, the best way to actually talk to me is on Twitter at Michael J. Knowles, Knowles, like Beyonce. But the best way to get the show is to go over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe. This is very important now as the social media companies seek to censor and deplatform anyone slightly to the right of Hillary Clinton.
Right.
So I highly recommend head over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever you Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. But you can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. There's basically no social media platform that I will not go to, though there are some that won't have me.
Right, and that includes lecterns, right? You're also a speaker.
That's right. Yes, I do.
And
I go.
Why do you put that sparkle stuff on yourself? That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I just want my shoes to have a nice shine now. I'm on this tour for Young America's Foundation. We do a ton of college speaking events throughout the year. And I've given some speeches that I think genuinely were controversial. Speeches on, say, Pride Month. We celebrate in our secular liturgical calendar not the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but the month of Pride, where we celebrate the deadliest of the deadly sins, which Thomas Aquinas described as the queen of all vices. Now it has, of course, become the vice of all queens.
Yeah.
And,
Hey. Yeah.
And but I gave a speech on that, on the 7 deadly sins of leftism, no problem. I gave a speech at the University of Missouri, Kansas City on what I thought was the most boring topic that I've ever spoken about. The topic of the speech was, men are not women. From the moment I opened my mouth to start giving this speech, I had dozens of people shrieking at the top of their lungs before one of them busted in a fire door and sprayed me with some unknown and almost certainly disgusting liquid substance, which kind of ruined my jacket and got some glitter on my shoes.
I watched it, and I was astonished at the out-of-proportion rage at your proposition that people can agree with or disagree with. But my goodness, no one saw this coming even 5 years ago. This kind of Mary Eberstadt has a book out now, coming out in a month or so, called Primal Scream, and it's about this how the failed sexual revolution has developed into an apotheosis called transgender confusion. So the way I put it is, 5 years ago, it seemed like we're galloping toward the abyss. Now it truly feels like the abyss is galloping toward us. This macro Nietzsche thing we're now looking at.
That is the problem, because there's a very practical difficulty for the left right now in moving their focus from sex protections to gender identity protections, which is you can't have both. You can't have feminism and transgenderism at the same time for a few reasons. Title IX protects girls' sports. It sets up separate sports leagues for girls. Sexual protections on the basis of sex. But the gender identity movement obliterates those sports leagues. So in the one hand, women can play within their own league. On the other hand, women cannot play sports in their own league. And this is going to be litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court. It creates other practical problems. The left for years talked about the importance of gay rights, same-sex rights. People are born this way. This is a sexual orientation, therefore we need to protect it. Yet the theory of mutable gender identity, a man can be a man one day and a woman the next day, totally undermines the entire idea of same-sex attraction and gay rights. Andrew Sullivan, who's gay himself, wrote about this just a few months ago. He said, I am gay in that I am attracted to other men. But if men don't exist and gender is just a fluid social construct, then my gay identity no longer exists. The left is going to have to make a choice there. What I think they're really after is the power, is the control. So it's not just the political control of winning over a demographic group. It's not just the social control of changing the nature of sports, say, or of the media. It is actually full ontological control to define reality itself. What they are saying is, I will determine what is a man and what is a woman. And if I say that that big, burly, hairy man with a Y chromosome, he's 250 pounds, if I say that man is a beautiful little 6-year-old girl, you have to agree with me, or I will remove you from polite society. That is a profound power grab, and we have not dealt with that in this country. And we'll see if they win it. It seems that right now they've got the momentum at their side.
If people think Michael is engaging in hyperbole here, look up Steph on Knee, a grown man married with large family who decided he was I believe a 6-year-old girl whom he named Steph on Knee. And you have to not only permit it, you have to love it. Look at the poor apology on the part of Mario Lopez last week, where he said something common sense that's believed by 99% of the population, namely that we probably shouldn't assign to 3-year-olds their destiny as a male or female, that parents, while you want to be loving, have to be the adults in the room. Well, he was just, browbeaten and given the ritual scourging and apologized. And he's probably still going to lose his gig. Michael, you can't apologize to this mob. It muscularizes them.
I know. I really wish that Mario Lopez understood this basic political fact. The apologies mean nothing. Actually, what we've seen in the past several years with the Me Too movement and other, and then obviously in the realm of political correctness, you've seen that the people who don't apologize have a much better chance of surviving and keeping their careers than the people who do apologize. Because when you apologize, you give in to the premise. Mario Lopez said we shouldn't mutilate our 3-year-olds' bodies and shoot them full of hormones.
Right.
Because one day the little boy says he's a little girl. When I was 3 years old, I said I was Batman. They shouldn't have stapled wings to my back, or
nor even called you Bruce.
Nor even called me Bruce. They shouldn't have done that because 3-year-olds don't know anything by definition. And so he said that, an obvious fact, we shouldn't abuse our children in this way. And he ultimately backed down and apologized. He said that his comments were ignorant and insensitive. They weren't ignorant, they were common sense. They were so obviously true. And it won't be enough. Once you cave in and give the left their premises, one, it hurts all of the rest of us, but at that point you're finished. I would be surprised if he gets to keep his show.
Let's turn to some Facebookish questions here. There's so many of them. A lot of them are repeats. Let's see here. Everyone's piling on with words of praise for your the focus on reverence in liturgy, 100%. Let me see. So many comments. Looking for questions, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll just take lavish praise. I'm certainly perfectly happy, to maybe next.
Let's
time.
just
Maybe next episode.
Therapeutic moral deism. Yeah, that Lyndon Prady. That's the one. Yeah, we could go on and on here. Let me skip rather than that. I want to. Yeah, there's millions of them, honey. Autarky Bear, thank you for the question and for the donation on the super chat here at YouTube. What do you say to someone who believes? What do you say to someone, Michael, that believes you're pagan and believe in a Satan-warped version of Christianity?
I have been accused of this before, and I've certainly lived as a pagan before too, so I guess the point is well taken. I think was it Cardinal Newman? No, it was Fulton Sheen who pointed out that there aren't 100 people in the country who hate Catholicism, but there are 1 million people who hate what they think Catholicism is in their own mistaken way.
Yeah.
And so I don't take it personally, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, there's a lot of ignorance out there, and often the Catholic Church presents a confusing message to the world. So I also don't particularly blame people who have that idea, because the Catholic Church is the church. It is the real church instituted by Christ. It's no surprise that it would be pilloried by the forces of this world. And but what I would point out is the observation that Chesterton made, which is it's a strange aspect of the Catholic Church that it's accused of opposite transgressions. So on the one hand, it's too ascetic, we're not worldly enough.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we're too lavish. We drink too much wine. We have too much gold. We have too many nice articles of clothing.
Yeah.
It's on the one hand, it's criticized for being overly intellectual, overly legalistic, overly philosophical. On the other hand, it's criticized for being hocus pocus, smells and bells. And the fact that it's being pilloried for opposite reasons seems to me to suggest that maybe the church is onto something. One thing I would always bring up when someone would accuse the Catholic Church of any number of sins is to ask them questions. That's the first way I would begin. I say, what's your problem with the Catholic Church? They'll say, you worship Mary. I say, oh, well, we don't. That's not something that we do. Well, okay, that's fine. Well, you believe, you worship the saints. I say, no, we don't worship the saints either.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, praying to the saints is unbiblical. And then you point out how it's biblical. They say, well, confessing your sins to a priest is unbiblical. You point out how it's biblical. You allow them to raise the questions. And I find if you are humble and you are calm and you are confident, people become irate. They become louder when they're less confident of what they are saying themselves. And also, nobody will concede an argument in the moment, but they might go home, they might think about it. All of the productive conversations I've had on that topic have ended in that way, and very frequently the people will come back that I'm arguing with, and they'll either be on the road to Catholicism or their minds will have been changed a little bit.
That's absolutely 100% true. I can verify that from my experiences doing Catholic Answers live hosting for 7.5 years. People would come up to me at conferences, and sometimes they'll still do, and they'll compliment me on my ability to make converts. And I grin and I say, can you name one time? And of course, what I mean to convey by that is it's 10,000 acts of kindness and patiently answering the question. If you know, the Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. If you take the question seriously and assume they're not trying to troll you, and you don't hear, this is important too, to not be afraid to say the magic words, I don't know. That's a very good question. I've never heard that before. I'll get back to you. Because nobody likes a smarty pants, right?
Of course. You know, I point out to people too, I always like to poke at intellectual pride and kind of ridicule intellectual pride, and that's in part because I've been guilty of it so much in my life, and I've found that humility is really helpful. Life is a lot better when you approach it with humility, and you'll get a lot smarter, and you'll obviously that's the beginning of wisdom. But when they present me their sort of whatever version of Christianity they have, it's their 5 easy bullet point, very simple, totally comprehensible, easy to digest Christianity. And I'll point out Dr. Johnson's line, which is that shallows are clear. Shallow thinking is clear. You know, I'll ask someone, say, hey, are you any good at math? They'll say, I was okay in math in high school. I say, okay. Can you explain multivariable calculus to me in 60 seconds? Can you explain stochastic analysis to me in 60 seconds? Can you explain any physical science to me in 60 seconds? They'll say, no, of course not. It's ridiculous. I'd have to go through textbook and textbook and textbook. Say, okay. So if you struggle to explain any aspect of the physical world in 60 seconds, do you really believe that you can convey to me the sum total of metaphysical reality in even less time? That seems unlikely to me. Maybe you've got a shallow answer that isn't conveying the wholeness of the picture.
There's a couple of patterns here I was thinking about when you were speaking just now, Michael. One is that, now this is a bit of a stereotype, but I think it bears out, at least anecdotally, that the best Protestants, like the seminary professors, the philosophers, the ones who are willing to think outside the framework of the family traditions that they were raised in, they often become Catholics. But the lowest information Catholics tend to exit the church and become Protestants. That's phenomenon number one. Phenomenon number two that I've noticed is that, again, it's almost invariable that when Protestants become Catholic, they're very grateful for their Protestant upbringing, for the grandmother who taught them the Bible, for the mother who cared for the poor weekly at the soup kitchen and provided a great foundation. And then they discovered the fullness of Jesus Christ and the Holy Mass and all the sacraments. But when Catholics leave Protestantism and become, full on, whether megachurch, evangelical, fill in the blank, fundamentalist, they're bitter. I mean, they despise the faith of their childhood. It's a curious thing. Why can't they just kind of live and let live and be happy with the new set of lenses that they acquired?
Of course, and I have found with friends who have left the Catholic Church or kind of moved toward more non-denominational, capital N, capital D, trademark over the D, variations of Christianity. I have found they weren't all that into the Catholic Church in the first place. It's that sort of thing of, well, I went to Catholic school for 4 years, and then I went to Mass every so often, so I know a whole lot about Catholicism. Meanwhile, you have someone, I think it was Cardinal Newman, who said, 10,000 problems do not make one doubt. Even one of the great theologians of, certainly probably the greatest English theologian, was one who couldn't describe all of the Catholic faith, because if you could, that would be a good sign that it's not the true faith. I mean, if it's a faith that I can sum up to you, then probably that ain't it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. The quote, by the way, first appears in the 1954 edition of a book. It's actually a trilogy that Catholic Answers came out with, a distilled single-volume version. It's called Radio Replies by Fathers Rumble and Carty. Father Rumble was an Australian convert, and I was honored to write the foreword to that new book, the new hardcover book. And it's the very first sentence in then Monsignor Sheen's preface to that book, the thing about, there are millions who hate what they think the Catholic Church is, but not 10 who hate what she really is, which is a very different question.
Right. Yeah. It's an amazing, because that one too, I'm not angry with people who accuse me of being some kind of pagan heretic or something. I mean, I didn't know anything about the faith, and now I know a little bit about the faith, and I think we're currently living in a culture where religiosity is plummeting, because you have whole generations of people, millennials and Gen Z, who have been raised without basically any kind of religious formation. They've also been raised without any culture. They've also been raised without education, period. I mean, even our institutions, highest institutions of learning, have been gutted from within. You can now graduate from Yale University, summa cum laude, with a degree in English, and never have read Shakespeare or Chaucer. That tells you what is that degree worth compared to what it was worth 10 or 20 years ago. And so if they don't know something, and I have the privilege of knowing, a little bit about it, I think it's more of an opportunity to present someone with some information that they didn't have before.
Patrick Kopf asks, why do you think atheism has found such appeal among young people? And is that contributing to the increasing lack of purpose among the youths?
It has. The short answer for why atheism has found an appeal among young people is that all shallows are clear, as Dr. Johnson said, and atheism is very clear. There is no God. It doesn't explain very much, atheism. There's not a really good argument for atheism. We could right now rattle off probably a dozen good arguments for the existence of God. I don't think we could name any for atheism. The closest would be the problem of pain and suffering, and even when you think about that one, it really becomes an argument for Christianity. But I think that's one reason, is it's very simple, and because our education system is so weak now, and catechesis is so weak now, that they're not exposed to that. But of course this contributes. We have this awful epidemic in this country of loneliness and despair. Suicide rates are way up among young people. They're up 70% in just the past few years, and I'm talking about people who are teenagers. We now have a huge proportion of even 12 to 17-year-olds who are on antidepressant drugs. And here's why. Because if really we live in a life that is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing, and when you die you take a dirt nap and turn to worm food, there isn't really much cause for hope. What is there in this world other than to pleasure yourself? I forget who it was. It may have been Moliere who said that, maybe it was George Bernard Shaw actually, that hell is the place where you have nothing to do but entertain yourself. And nothing to do but amuse yourself. And that's kind of the culture we're living in. We have unprecedented wealth. In just the history of the world, we are so rich in this country. We don't really need to do very much. Everybody gets to go to college practically at this point, and college doesn't even require a lot of work. You can kind of be frivolous for 4 years and then get some job and not really have to work with your hands very often. It's just a relatively, obviously people have a lot of struggles, but it's a relatively easy life. And so we get to this morality of the post-1960s, post-sexual revolution, which is, if it feels good, do it. But to what end? You know, if we really are just material beings and all of the spiritual realities that we intuit are just an illusion, like, say, Samuel Harris would make us think, or, you know, that our free will is just an illusion, whatever that means, good luck making an argument for that, then how do we explain everything that actually matters to us? Love, joy, ambition, sorrow, grief. I mean, all of those things are metaphysical. They're not physical. And so we convince ourselves that it's an illusion, that it's just a big cosmic joke on us. And that causes one to despair until you realize that it's a pack of lies.
Yeah, if God can't be put under a microscope, then neither can atheism, because it's less than nothing. Sheen, by the way, Lois here, Lois Lamonda says, more mentions of Sheen, we should start it as a drinking game. Every time someone brings up soon-to-be blessed Sheen. Getting a lot of questions about your appearance on the Sunday show with Ben Shapiro with respect to Ben. I've noticed something, I'll put you on the spot a little bit, but these are questions I think I should be asking Ben Shapiro. Ben is very open in getting Christians in front of him and picking their brains. And then I've noticed this with 3 or 4 guests in the last couple of months. When he gets close to that flame, he kind of backs off and the line of questioning changes a little bit. And this goes to a broader phenomenon, and that is, it doesn't matter what the arguments are if you're not cooperating with grace. You mentioned Chesterton, the greatest, some say, the writer of the best English-speaking book on apologetics for Catholics, Orthodoxy. Well, most people don't know that Chesterton was Anglican when he wrote that, and he stayed Anglican for 14 years. I mean, GK, don't you buy your own arguments? But I would love to go into, maybe hit Drew Clavin with like blessed holy water in a squirt gun until he just submits to Rome. That'd be awesome.
I know, it's sort of, I keep trying to do that. It's sort of what happened to me, I guess, at the University of Missouri, except this would be good because it'd be full of holy water. I once said to Ben, he and I were on a plane somewhere coming back from an event, and I said, listen, pal, I'm not going to push it too hard. We were talking actually about the book that he had just written on the right side of history, how, I forget the subtitle, but it was how reason and revelation made the West great. And so we're talking about Thomas Aquinas, we're talking about the history of Christianity, and I said, look, I'm not going to push you. I know you've got your religious beliefs, but if this plane goes down, I'm going to take this glass of water and throw it on your head and hope that it works. So I'm just warning you now, that is what's going to happen. And, I think he took it graciously.
You didn't arrange something, because you could have arranged some severe turbulence with the pilot, right?
That is true. I slipped the pilot 100. I said, listen, you're going to need to turn that wheel a little bit over here. We've got eternal plans ahead of us.
Exactly right. Going to a couple more here inside of the Facebook. Beth Gross, my dear friend and wing woman, Beth Gross. The Industrial Revolution took men and women from the home and in a way separated men from boys, and the sexual revolution devalued the human person. Both reduced human beings to commodities. That seems to have been borne out as true.
I entirely agree with that, and I think this is one area that conservatives should take more seriously, and I think we are taking it a little bit more seriously. This got lost a little bit in the fight against Soviet communism during the Cold War, but at the beginning of what we would call the modern era of conservative thought, Edmund Burke was lamenting this descent into sophistry and just turning the world into a series of economic tables. He said, the age of chivalry is gone, that of sophisters, economists, and calculators has succeeded it, and the glory of Europe is extinguished forever. He goes on to talk about the nobility of rank and class and the relations between the sexes. And all of that kind of gets wiped out by these egghead economists who boil the human beings down to just sort of characters on a utilitarian table. And maybe in like the 1980s and toward the end of the Cold War, conservatives had in a way embraced this kind of economics, these ideas that really all we need to value is GDP growth and transforming America into a consumer culture and getting people out there to go work. I mean, President Trump regularly touts how we have the lowest female unemployment ever, as though this were some wonderful thing, as though we want to get every single woman out of the home and away from raising kids and to work in an office making widgets somewhere. Obviously, it's a good thing that women who want to have jobs can have jobs, but the end of man is not simply for us all to be working for giant corporations pushing paper around desks. That is not the end goal of life. And conservatives now, I think, are turning their attention a little bit away from that egghead financial fiscal wonkery and moving back toward cultural and ultimately spiritual questions about politics, what would really be the eternal questions about politics. And I think that's a step in the right direction, and it's a reaction to over 100 years of consequences of the Industrial Revolution.
Great. You just distilled a ton in one little spot. I saw what you did there, by the way, with egghead and boiled. It's a very
How
subtle
about that,
connection there.
I'm here all week. Try the veal.
Tip your waitress. Deacon Patrick Lappert, this transgender medicine issue will be decided by tort law. The medical outcomes of this insanity will bring thousands of parents and adults to the lawyers, and you will be hearing commercials on TV that begin with, "Have you or a loved one been injured by a transgender medicine?"
Absolutely right. I mean, unfortunately, you're going to see kids suing their parents 20 years from now.
That's a good point, too.
Because, and I mean, talk about, this is guaranteed to happen. And it is why I urge social media companies and corporate America and legislators, no matter what you believe, you don't need to be a practicing Christian, you can be a hard-on, full-on atheist, but you might take an agnostic stance to this transgender fad. Because until about 5 minutes ago, I mean practically, until 5 years ago, the notion that a man could become a woman simply by imagining it so was ridiculous. It was unheard of. It is a really poorly thought out Gnostic dualist heresy. It just is not going to hold up over time. And as people are experimenting in this, you're going to have horrific social consequences from it. You're going to have lots of lawsuits. This is going to be litigated. This is going to be debated by the people who have been burned by it. And I just think it would behoove corporations and politicians and our culture broadly to take a breather. I'm not saying you've got to show up to Mass on Sunday. I'm just saying, out of your own self-interest, out of your own prudence, realize that there are intellectual fads and social fads that come and go in the blink of an eye. And this is one of them that is not going to be able to be sustained as it currently is being discussed, because it's totally incoherent.
There are already children suing their parents for wrongful abortion survival.
Wow.
It sounds like a Babylon Bee, Eye of the Tiber, Onion parody. Yeah, children, I believe it's the UK, sued their parents because their life was so horrible, and they wish that the parents' abortion had succeeded. I'm not making it up.
I thought you meant they were suing because they tried to abort them in the first place. But you're saying they're suing because their life is no good and they wish they had been aborted to begin with.
It's the Kafka-esque opposite inverse of that, right?
Oh my gosh!
Correct.
We are, some days I think we've gone through the looking glass. We are now so far gone. It makes my job a lot harder. It makes those of us who are Hollywood conservatives like to tell a joke every now and again. It makes it so much harder because we have transcended parody. We are so far gone.
You can't do it. You can't. Right.
You can't do it. Yep.
This is why parody sites are skyrocketing, because actual news, is provides indistinguishable. Right. I was thinking about bringing up fake news. You've already touched on it eloquently in the last few minutes in different ways. But I was thinking about the first or the most famous victim of fake news was Jesus at his 2 trials. All these people saying things about him that were either half true or not true at all, to the judge known as Pontius Pilate, then to the other judge known as King Herod. So fake news is not a new phenomenon.
And as in all things, he offers a great example, because his response to all of that fake news is silence. He lets them spew their nonsense, and then they accuse him of something. He says, well, you say so. Are you a king? You say so. You're the one saying it. This is, I think, conservatives who see the game, and politically speaking, conservatives are usually on the receiving end of the fake news. This is the right approach, because if you protest, if you say, no, I'm not really a vicious, bigot, racist, sexist, whatever word they're going to throw at you. If you protest, they're never going to give you credit for it. They're never going to believe you. It makes you look as though you're defending something, like that classical logical error, but it's the loaded question. Have you stopped beating your wife? Any way you answer it, it doesn't look good for you. I think the more dignified response is to say, listen, CNN, I don't owe you an answer to anything. You have no credibility. You have no moral standing. I don't owe you an answer, and I'm not going to even accept the premise that you're a journalistic outlet by taking your question. I mean, I think that's the way that we should handle it. And the conservatives who have not been totally run over by the mainstream media tend to be the ones who do that. President Trump, who, they ask him some question, and he looks at them, he laughs at them, and he says, yeah, you're fake news. I don't owe you an answer for anything.
Yeah. And if you look at it in the original Hebrew, no, I'm just kidding. Matt Mercy asks, Michael Knowles, could you comment a little bit on the history of anti-Catholicism in America?
Yes. Arthur Schlesinger, the historian, said that anti-Catholicism is the deepest bias in American history. And I suppose he's right in the sense that, our country was founded by my ancestors, the incredibly zealous Puritans, who were anti-Anglican and most profoundly anti-Catholic. And this has endured over time, although there's this good book out right now by Tim Gordon called Catholic Republic. Which tells
he's been on my show talking about it. Yep.
It's terrific. I'm actually just reading it now. And he makes a good argument, not that America is a Catholic country or is a consciously Catholic country, but that it is Catholicism that lies at the root of all of the ideas and institutions that actually have built up the country. I think that's true, but it is an enduring bias in American history, and I don't see it going away anytime soon.
No, I don't either. You can say just about anything about any other religious group, especially the left-leaning brethren, but open season on the Catholic faith. Yeah, Tim Gordon is, his book is, I'd like to see it go more viral, because the premise that Catholicism, Catholic principles, the thinking of Thomas Aquinas and Augustine are in the DNA of the founding documents. It's basically, the premise is also that the framers of the founding documents kind of raided the Catholic pantry, however anonymously, and it's there. I mean, there's the premise of natural law, that these truths are self-evident. In other words, the Bible doesn't say they're self-evident, but the founders do, because of this intuition that right and wrong are something that you and I can detect, even without divine revelation.
Of course, and it is, as Hilaire Belloc said, controversially, the faith is Europe. Europe is the faith. The idea that our civilization is utterly formed by the Catholic Church, by at least 1,500 years of Catholic history, and more than that before the crack up of the Protestant Revolution, but that you can't shake that kind of formation overnight because some Enlightenment Jacobin wants you to.
Right. Very serious question from Adam Minahan of the Catholic Man Show. Important question. What's Michael's favorite cigar and scotch combo?
Oh, you're asking me to choose one of my children. How am I supposed to do that? My all-time favorite cigar is the 2008 Partaga La Casa del Habano 15-year. It is a virtually impossible cigar to find, though I've heard rumors that Arnold Schwarzenegger loves it. So someday, if he ever opens his humidor, I'll try to grab some. I love that. I tend to like Cubans, though I like a lot of Nicaraguan cigars as well. And on the Nicaraguan front, I love My Father's cigars. You can get them for $10. I like Curivari and Socrates. That's kind of new to the scene, really good. Tabernacle, since we're talking about religion, is a great cigar that just came out in the last couple of years. Also, really good prices. At the higher price point, I love Padron 1926. Anniversario, I love Opus X, Lost City, that's a great smoke. Some of the Davidoff cigars are really good, though a little pricey. And for my drink, obviously I would love to have a more expensive scotch, a Lagavulin 16 or a Macallan 18 or one of these really highfalutin things. But my go-to all the time, the one that I keep in my decanter, is, to quote Christopher Hitchens, the preferred scotch of the Iraqi Ba'ath Party, of the Libyan dictatorship, of one stream of the Saudi royal family, of the Palestine Liberation Organization, and Winston Churchill, the finest blended scotch ever made, Johnny Walker Black Label.
Johnny Walker Black Label, the favorite of hoi polloi everywhere. Very good.
Boy, yeah, truly the most detestable creatures on earth, and Winston Churchill. and then probably I fall somewhere in the middle between those two poles.
Growing up in Canada, where there was never any kind of embargo against Cuban cigars, we always laughed at our American friends who did flips and twists like Marsha Brady trying to meet Joe Namath. Forget these things; they're just cigars to us guys. It's the taboo attraction there because you couldn't have it for so many years. Always.
I know. I think you've basically convinced me. It's the best argument I've ever heard to move up to America's hat up north. So maybe I'll have to take a trip and fill up the humidor.
Bitterly resemble that. Deacon Lappert, just one more thing on people leaving the respective faiths. People leave Protestantism are leaving an idea. People leaving the Catholic Church are leaving a person. Hence the personal animus. Interesting.
That's a good summary of it, because this is the issue, and it's one of the good arguments for Catholicism that brought me back to the church, and it actually brought a Protestant friend of mine. He had been a cradle Catholic. He'd gone to mega churches for almost all of his life, was sort of anti-Catholic, and then he came back to the church too with the zeal of a convert, which was an argument not from any religious book per se, but from a book called Poetic Diction, by Owen Barfield, who was a forgotten inkling. He was friends with C.S. Lewis and all of those guys. It's a really superb book, and it's about language, and it's about symbols. And when you think about symbols, Protestantism really pulls apart the symbol and the symbolized, so that if you're to take Holy Communion, when even you do take Holy Communion, it's not the real presence of Christ. It's just a wafer that reminds us to think about what that means.
It means a lot.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And whereas in the sacraments, that is the unity of the symbol and the symbolized. This obviously makes sense in the light of the faith. When Christ institutes his church, he doesn't just proclaim an idea or put it on a piece of paper and mail it out to a bunch of places. He picks a guy. He says, Peter, you are Peter. On this rock I will build my church. I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. What you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. What you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. He then says to specific men, he says, you have the power to forgive sins. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven. Whose sins you retain are retained. This is not just some idea that is being proclaimed. It is a real power to forgive sins or to bind sins. And in Christ himself, you see this unity of the divine logic of the universe, this perfectly metaphysical essence, and a man, this perfectly physical essence. That is the most perfect combination of the symbol and the symbolized. And you see this reflected in the Holy Church. You see this regularly in our interaction with the sacraments. And it's the argument to come on home to the church, because you can't get it anywhere else.
You can't always get what you want, unless you're looking for actual sacraments, in which case you can. They're there. That was Mick Jagger's original version, and someone said we can't do that.
It's a little wordy, Mick.
Yeah. Let's turn that to. I want to get to Hollywood in a moment. Someone on YouTube says, Jay Akron, why is Catholicism totally fixated on homosexuality? It's not. Thank you, Jay. Is this all Catholic commentators want to talk about, homosexuality ad nauseum? Not at all, Jay. He says that we don't care. Well, I wish I could stop caring about it, because it's an icky topic, and if you talk about the behavior that characterizes the lifestyle, everybody heads for the exits. But since it's so propagandized day and night by the mainstream media and culture generally, Catholics are tired of it. So we want to defend common sense using whatever tools we have at our disposal, starting with natural law. It's not something I think about. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I would point out, I don't think we've talked about same-sex attraction once. I mean, if we have, we've talked about it for maybe 30 seconds on this whole broadcast.
Right.
But let's take this idea to its logical conclusion, because I do see the point. How many people have same-sex attractions? Statistically, not very many. And yet it's become a big cultural question. Take that all the way to gender ideology. How many people are genuinely confused about their biology? How many people have sexual confusion or gender dysphoria or transgenderism, whatever term you want to use? It's about 0.2% of the population, between 0.1 and at the highest estimate, 0.6. And so we're talking about very, very few people, and yet this topic has come to dominate our national debate. It's not because conservatives are obsessed with it, or Catholics are obsessed with it, or other religious groups are obsessed. It's because the secular left has forced us at every step of the way to confront this problem that afflicts very, very few people, and this psychological delusion. And it's because this psychological delusion is a key to unlocking so much of their cultural and political agenda. But when President Trump was asked about this on the campaign trail in 2016, they said, "What do you think about laws to stipulate that people who are men but they think they're women can use the women's bathroom?"
Right.
And he said, "What are you talking about? Like, is this a problem? Is this an issue?" No, the left wants to make it an issue so that they can undermine, even our own perception of reality itself.
Right. Yeah. 100%. I liken it to a very small rudder attached to a very large cruise ship. That small little percentage is the guiding thing that dominates the public conversation and the media discourse. It's astounding. I think more people enjoy orange sweaters than are afflicted with transgenderism, but there are no TV shows devoted to this orange sweaterism. So more than one person has said your next book has to be on your reversion, Michael. It'll be in your bonnet there.
Oh, that's pretty good. Well, the trouble is that book would involve words. So, then it'll take much longer to write. Although I guess I could just, because my reversion was so the product of grace and providence, maybe the book title could be my responsibility and for my own reversion to Catholicism, a comprehensive guide, and then it could have the same content as my prior magnum opus.
Or you could create a dummy website called Reasons to Not Become Catholic, and it's just a pointer to the book on the voting for Democrats.
That's right. Yeah. That's perfect. All right, we've written my second book already.
Margot Basso says the following. Patrick didn't even mention my name on how I pushed him to get Michael J. Knowles on this live stream. Oh, well, humility is good for me. See what I did there, Margot? By the way, Michael was already well in my Rolodex to come on, so I hope I rubbed it, a little bit there.
I'm so glad to hear from Margot. Margot's one of my Twitter friends, so I'm glad that now you can be the mediator, between us.
The mediatrix of some Margos. Yes. Have you heard the theory that Margot Basso is actually a Russian bot that is responsible for colluding with the White House?
Well, I suspected that. I mean, as a Russian bot myself, speaking to another Russian bot, I just assumed we were all in the same technological family. If you could fit that on a T-shirt, I would buy it. Awesome. Okay. Let me see here. A lot of gay stuff. Don't want to be accused of being obsessive with that. I like the Sheen drinking game idea. That's great. I want to mention our Coffin Nation people too here. Get on the waiting list, coffinnation.com. This is our culture building website. We have members in over 18 countries and growing. It was 5 a couple weeks ago. Now it's 18. We've got people in every state. In Australia, I would love to come to Australia. Oh, did you hear that hint being dropped? Love to go to the land down under. I have a special love for Australian. Maybe it's because I'm part of the British Empire. By the way, Michael, and all my American friends, if you just apologize, we'll let you back into England. Forgiven or forgotten, no problem. We're going to have to wait until the end of the Trump era. I mean, this. Although I guess the UK now is getting Boris Johnson, so they're getting their own Trump, and maybe it makes the invitation sweeter.
I thought you were going to say you're going to have to wait till the end of the age.
Yeah, that politically speaking, the end of Trump's presidency does seem like the end of the age, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What on earth could come next?
Yeah, and all the celebrities will have to move back from Canada. Oops! Oh no, no one actually went away. Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Michael, Hollywood. I've been on the fringes of the entertainment industry for 15 or 20 years. I'm a writer. I've produced a movie. I love writers. That's kind of my I guess the spear point of what I like to do. I pay attention to writers. I go old school and I buy actual paper scripts. I'm kind of a script junkie. And I've noticed that it's very hard for writers who have say a Christian worldview, who don't want to write Jesus films. It's very hard for them to find deep-pocketed Christians willing to fund mini majors to make films. And these are the people who could otherwise donate. They love films. They go to movies every weekend with their family, but they think of it as something so abstract and you really can't plant any seeds. Meanwhile, the left are pouring $6 billion plus every year in their product, which is and helps to form and shape hearts and minds. Why are so many Christian let's say, people of financial wealth who could support Christians in Hollywood, they treat it like it's not even, they don't even think of it as missionary territory. It's a frustration I run into over and over again.
They don't. It's because Christians tend to be more practically minded. They tend to be more politically conservative out here in Hollywood. Conservatives have this problem. They tend to be more practically minded too. And so they're all willing to donate to the nonprofit. They're all willing to donate to this missionary group. They're all willing to donate to a political campaign. They're all willing to donate to some ballot measure, to protect, say, religious liberty.
Or a wing on a building.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're all willing to do that, but they haven't grasped the importance of the culture. They haven't grasped St. Andrew Breitbart's famous maxim that politics is downstream of culture. And so the ones who have, the Christians who have gotten the culture idea, unfortunately bring their kind of practical mindedness to the art form. And so you just get a lot of bad movies. I'm not going to call them out, and I'm not going to call out the people who have made them, but they're just not good. And so the most important thing for a work of art is to be good. You need to make sure that you actually want to sit and watch the movie, and then it can convey your message. Hollywood does make the occasional Christian movie. A few years ago, the Coen brothers came out with Hail Caesar, which wasn't a huge box office hit, though it was in the theaters for a long time. Hail Caesar is one of the most profoundly Christian movies that I've seen made, I don't know, since The Passion of the Christ or something. But it was subtle because they are just simply brilliant filmmakers. The left is much more subtle. They're much craftier about their message. They'll make a movie that's really quite watchable, and they'll just slip in all of their ideological hobby horses. They'll just slip in everything they want into that movie, and so it'll be at the point where even I will go see one of these movies because I want to see the movie and I want to be a part of the culture. So even if the movie's no good, like some of these Disney remakes or those awful superhero movies, you go and you see them just to be part of the conversation, and what you're watching is in large part social justice, warrior, leftist, secular political messages.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the left, when they become artists, are much more willing to take risks. We tend to be, if you're an artist who's a Christian, the temptation to make a Jesus character or to have some kind of moral lesson is almost overwhelming. It's almost an advantage to be either a lapsed Christian or a secular Jew or an atheist or something. There's a terrific essay by Professor Tom Parham, Parham. It's called "Why Do Heathens Make the Best Christian Movies?" He's got example after example of kind of schlocky, cheese-laden Christian films for a very niched market versus a movie like Braveheart or Saving Private Ryan, or there's another wonderful movie it's a Norwegian director, and it stars Lena Headey, Stellan Skarsgård, and Charlotte Rampling. It's called Aberdeen. It's father-daughter road trip, lots of potty words. In fact, there's maybe a bit of nudity, but it's not porn nudity. It's very, very fast. It's a movie. It's an extended exploration of what a true father is, and lots of Catholic content along the way, and maybe none of it intended. You think of Saving Private Ryan, about a teacher sent from sent from on high behind enemy lines to rescue the private. It's not saving General Ryan or saving Admiral Ryan. The whole mission is for the lowest guy in the totem pole. And Tom Hanks's character is kind of a Christ figure who teaches the band of apostles / soldiers how to lay down their lives for someone they don't even know. And then at the end, he says, remember Hanks's last words as the P-51 Mustangs are flying over, blowing up the Panzers to smithereens. He says, "Earn this." And that's the beautiful fade into Matt Damon's eye. And then you realize, oh my gosh, of course, it was Ryan who's the old guy at the Normandy cemetery. Very beautiful film. That's the gospel accidentally retold in a totally secular garb. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, of course. And this is one of the nice aspects, I guess, of the truly great directors of Spielberg, for instance, which is he may not even be conscious of it, but if you are telling a great story, you will be telling a Christian story. You don't need to set out to tell some sort of shallow, moralizing Christian story or what you think a Christian story is. If you tell a great story with truth, plays and films are acting truthfully in imaginary circumstances. If you do that, you will be telling a Christian story, and of course Christianity is the greatest story ever told, all the more so because it actually happened. That gives you a little bit of hope, and it's the reason why the great directors really are the great directors. Most of Hollywood is not full of great directors, and they still get all of their schlock made, and they do it because that's the culture we live in.
Yeah, they definitely are selective in which films get the tiny gold statuette and which don't. Think of a movie like Tom Hooper's adaptation of Les Miserables. The pressure on him must have been enormous to put onto a screen again, because it's been Les Miserables is the one story most often filmed. There are over 50 film versions of the story in world history. Yeah, it's in the Guinness Book of Records. But he was largely ignored at the Oscars. It made a lot of money, but I think they won costume Oscar maybe. The classic example of that is the Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. Why the great Jim Caviezel performance was not awarded with Best Actor is it's hard to take. There's a rumor that Mel Gibson is writing a film about the Maccabees, which is a very Gibson-esque story, right? Blood oath, revenge.
It is.
Yeah.
And it is very Gibson-esque, and he is one of the most talented guys in town. And he, because of his politics and because of his personal behavior, he was run out of town for a while. Though he has still managed to get some films made, and he's just an incredible talent. But it is an amazing example. Talk about the form matching the content of being despised in this world. The Passion of the Christ is one of the greatest films ever made, and Jim Caviezel's performance is just astounding. And nothing, of course he gets nothing for it, and nor would we expect him to.
Do you think that maybe Lou Ferrigno would have been equally good in the role?
It would have been quite interesting to watch. Yeah, I don't know how his Aramaic is, but I don't know. Maybe he's fluent.
When I see the scene when Jesus is before Pilate, I think, man, if he was Bruce Bannister and he just turned green and freaked out, I mean, he could just utterly destroy Pontius Pilate, which is
That's
another
the fan fiction. Yeah,
I can see a meme happening there. I'm always angry. Yeah, that's a good lesson for people who are on Twitter. Jesus Christ, the God-man, the God of the universe in the flesh, had 10,000 legions of angels, and these total jerks are lying about him, and he says nothing. Yeah, he kind of lets the failure happen, and because he knows the ending is going to be an utterly glorious victory.
That's a hard teaching, Patrick. Sometimes when you're on Twitter and that's a very hard teaching. That sort of graciousness and mercy.
Yes, someone corrected me. Bruce Banner, not Bannister. I was mixing him up with
Bannister. Yes.
Yeah, Bannister. I was thinking of Roger Bannister, who ran the first 4-minute mile. Sometimes my gray matter for names get a little bit crossed. Great to see everybody here. Boy, I know I could go for 9 more hours. 9 is my go-to, but I did promise a shorter session, Michael. It's been a blast. I always learn a ton. Thank you, Colin McMenamin. Thank for all the people who donated on the super chats, and the super chats as well. They're really super. Super chats. Quick reminder to people. My wife and I lead pilgrimages around the world. We go to the Holy Land, we go to Italy, and next year, it sounds weird, it's just in the spring, May 17th through 25th, we're going to the Alps, to Catholic Bavaria. We're going to learn the story of little Joey Ratzinger, how he became Father Joseph Ratzinger. We'll be in the church where he was baptized, learn about his ecclesial service to the church, all the way up to the time when he was elected Pope Benedict XVI. We're going to be at the Dachau death camp in the Carmelite Monastery. We'll have Holy Mass there. We're going to go to Munich. We're going to go to Regensburg, learn all about his so-called controversial speech there, and then we're going to go into Austria. 30 minutes over the border is Salzburg. We're going to do the Sound of Music tour. And it all culminates at the live Passion Play in Oberammergau. This thing is put on every 10 years, starting in the mid-17th century. That's a whole backstory I don't have time to share now, but I would love to have you join us. It's patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. Put that link up here, patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. Our spiritual director is the wonderful Holy Cross Father and practicing Catholic, Father Willie Raymond, who's the actor in the cause of canonization of Father Patrick Peyton. You might have heard the phrase, the family that prays together stays together. So this is a pilgrimage of faith. We don't run tours. This is a pilgrimage, and we hope you join us. So patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. pilgrimage. Anything else?
That sounds so great. Both the pilgrimage and
Yes.
just pronouncing Oberammergau. Both of those things. I just love the sound of both of them. So
Well,
I hope it'd be great to be able to join you on that too.
You did it well, Oberammergau. Margot is also insisting that you join us. We're having a Coffin Nation meetup. I want to do a culture building conference somewhere near the beach in Orange County. So I'm going to just throw a little line out and see if you're an iridescent, juicy worm that might come down and present for us.
I'll bring the stogies.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right, music to my ears. And I'll even accept Cuban.
That's very gracious of you.
All right.
Thank you for that,
Mike. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. Shout out to all the folks we couldn't get to. A lot of interest. No surprise. And I do hope to catch up soon. Godspeed, Michael Knowles.
All right. See you, Patrick. Thanks.
All right. Very good. This is the Patrick Coffin Show live stream. See you next week. Same time, same channel. 5 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern. One more thing. Oh, yeah. Don't miss the show. The Patrick Coffin Show. Subscribe. Go to YouTube. Or go to Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean every week. And next week's guest is the one and only Raymond Cardinal Burke. Uncensored, unfiltered, off the reservation on the state of the church. We'll see you then. God bless and be well.